the woman who didn't belong. The ranch lay beneath a wide, indifferent sky, where the wind moved like a restless spirit through dry grass and weathered wood. It was a place built for endurance, not comfort. Fences worn smooth by time, earth hardened by sun, and silence stretching farther than any road. Caleb Ríos belonged to that silence. He stood near the corral, watching a restless horse test the strength of its enclosure. His movements were deliberate, economical, as if every gesture had been practiced until it became instinct. There was nothing careless about him. Not his posture, not his gaze, and certainly not the distance he kept from people. Life had taught him that closeness invited loss, and loss was a debt he refused to pay again. The sound of an approaching vehicle broke the rhythm of the wind. Caleb didn't turn immediately. Visitors were rare and rarely welcome. When he finally faced the dirt road, the car had already come to a stop, its polished surface glaring against the muted tones of the land. It looked out of place, too clean, too deliberate, like something that didn't understand where it had arrived. The door opened, and a woman stepped out. She hesitated, just briefly, as her shoes met the uneven ground. That single pause told him more than anything else could. She didn't belong here. Not in the way her posture adjusted, not in the way her eyes scanned the ranch as if searching for something familiar and finding nothing. Caleb approached slowly, his boots pressing into the dust with quiet certainty. He stopped a few feet away, giving her space, studying her without disguise. "Elena Cross?" he asked. Her name felt strange in his mouth, too refined for a place like this. "Yes," she replied, her voice steady, though her fingers tightened slightly around the strap of her bag. "You must be Caleb." He nodded once. There was a moment, brief but noticeable, where neither of them spoke. The wind filled the silence, tugging lightly at the loose strands of her hair. She looked tired, he realized. Not the kind of tired that sleep could fix, but something deeper, something settled beneath the surface. "You're early," he said. "I didn't want to be late. That's not a problem here." A faint smile touched her lips, though it didn't reach her eyes. "I suppose I'll have to get used to that." Caleb gestured toward the house, a modest structure of wood and stone that carried the same quiet resilience as everything else on the land. "You can settle in. It's simple, but it'll do." "I'm not looking for comfort," she said, almost too quickly. That caught his attention. Most people came here seeking escape, but they still expected ease. She spoke as if comfort were something she had already learned to live without. He led the way, noticing how carefully she followed, watching her step as if the ground might shift beneath her. Inside, the air was cooler, the scent of aged wood and faint smoke lingering in the space. He set her bag down near the small table. "You'll find what you need," he said. "Water's out back. Meals are early." She nodded, taking in the room with quiet observation. Her gaze lingered on the worn surfaces, the absence of excess. Nothing here pretended to be more than it was. "It's peaceful," she said after a moment. Caleb leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed loosely. "Some people call it that, and you don't. I call it honest." She looked at him, then really looked as if weighing the meaning behind his words. There was something in her expression, curiosity, perhaps, or recognition. It unsettled him more than he expected. "Honesty can be difficult," she said. "It usually is." Another pause stretched between them, but this one felt different, less uncertain, more deliberate. As if both of them understood there were things being said beneath the surface, things neither of them was ready to name. A distant sound broke the moment, the faint hum of a phone vibrating inside her bag. Elena stiffened. Caleb noticed the change immediately. The calm she had carried with her seemed to fracture, just slightly, but enough to be seen. She hesitated before reaching for the bag, as if already knowing what waited on the other end. "You should answer that," he said. Her fingers lingered on the edge of the zipper. "It can wait. It doesn't sound like it wants to." She exhaled quietly, then pulled the phone free. The screen lit her face for a brief second, and whatever she saw there tightened her expression in a way she couldn't hide. "Elena." The voice on the other end was sharp, controlled, and unmistakably accustomed to being obeyed. Even from a distance, Caleb could hear the edge in it. She turned slightly away, lowering her voice. I told you I'd arrived safely. You didn't say when you'd call. I just got here. That's not an excuse. Caleb looked away, giving her what privacy he could, but the tension in her voice carried through the room. I'm busy right now, she said. We'll talk later. There was a pause, then, don't forget who you belong to. The line went dead. For a moment, Elena didn't move. The phone remained in her hand, her gaze fixed on nothing. When she finally lowered it, the composure she had arrived with felt thinner, more fragile. Caleb pushed himself off the doorframe. Everything all right? She forced a small nod. Yes, just routine. He didn't believe her. Not entirely, but he also didn't ask more. People brought their own storms with them, and it wasn't his place to chase the thunder. If you need anything, he said, you'll find me outside. As he stepped back into the fading light, the wind greeted him again, steady and familiar. But something had shifted. The silence no longer felt untouched. Inside the house, Elena stood alone, her hand resting lightly against the table as if grounding herself. She glanced toward the open doorway, where Caleb had disappeared, her expression softening in a way she hadn't expected. For the first time in a long while, the weight pressing against her chest eased, just slightly, just enough to notice. And that frightened her more than anything else. Lines that should not blur. Morning came quietly to the ranch, arriving not with noise, but with light, slow and deliberate, spilling across the land as if testing its welcome. The air held a crisp stillness, broken only by the distant lowing of cattle and the rhythmic creak of wood adjusting to warmth. Elena had been awake long before the sun fully rose. Sleep had come in fragments, interrupted by thoughts she couldn't quiet. The unfamiliar bed, the silence, the absence of expectation, it all felt disorienting in a way she hadn't anticipated. She sat at the edge of the narrow mattress, her hands resting in her lap, listening to the quiet as if it might reveal something she had been missing. In her world, silence had always carried tension. Here it seemed to carry space. She stepped outside just as the first rays of sunlight stretched across the fields. Caleb was already working. He moved with the same quiet precision she had noticed the day before, his attention fixed on the tasks at hand. There was no hesitation in him, no wasted motion. Watching him stirred something unfamiliar, a kind of steadiness she hadn't realized she craved. You wake early, he said without turning. Elena paused, surprised. I thought you might not have noticed. I notice what matters. The words lingered longer than they should have. She approached slowly, careful with her steps, as though entering a place that required permission. Is there something I can help with? Caleb finally looked at her, his gaze assessing, not dismissive but measured. You don't have to. I didn't ask if I had to. A flicker of something, approval, perhaps, passed through his expression. All right, he said. Stay close. The animals don't trust strangers. I don't blame them. That earned the faintest hint of a smile. The work was simple in instruction, but demanding in practice. Elena followed his guidance, learning quickly, but not without missteps. Each mistake was met with correction, not criticism. Caleb's patience was quiet, almost unspoken, but it was there. Time moved differently under the open sky. Hours passed without the sharp edges she was used to, without the constant pressure of being watched or judged. For the first time in a long while, she felt present. You're not what I expected, Caleb said later, as they paused near the fence line. Elena wiped her hands against the fabric of her dress, catching her breath. I could say the same. What did you expect? She considered the question carefully. Someone harder, she admitted. Someone less aware. Caleb's brow lifted slightly. Aware of what? Of people. He glanced out across the land, his expression unreadable. People are complicated. The land isn't. That's why you stay out here. It's one reason. There was more beneath his answer. She could feel it, but he didn't offer it, and she didn't press. A breeze passed between them, carrying the scent of dust and sun-warmed earth. Elena closed her eyes for a brief moment, letting it settle over her. I used to think simplicity meant emptiness, she said. But this, she gestured faintly to the open space around them. This feels full. Caleb studied her then, more closely than before. You don't sound like someone who's had much of it. I haven't. The honesty in her voice caught him off guard. Before he could respond, the distant sound of an engine broke through the stillness. Elena's eyes snapped open. The reaction was immediate, instinctive. The calm she had carried all morning vanished, replaced by something sharper, unease, edged with recognition. Caleb followed her gaze to the road. A vehicle approached, slower than the one from the day before, but no less deliberate. Are you expecting someone? He asked. Elena shook her head, though the movement lacked certainty. No, but her voice betrayed her. The car came to a stop near the house, its presence cutting into the quiet like an intrusion. The door opened, and a man stepped out with the kind of confidence that didn't ask for permission. Victor Cross. Even from a distance, his presence was unmistakable. He carried himself with control, every movement precise, calculated. His gaze swept over the ranch before settling on Elena. She didn't move. Caleb glanced at her, noting the tension in her posture, the way her hands had clenched at her sides. You know him? It wasn't a question. Elena swallowed, forcing herself to step forward. Yes. Victor closed the distance between them with measured strides. His expression was composed, but there was something beneath it, something cold. You left without telling me, he said, his voice even but edged with accusation. I told you I needed time. You didn't tell me where. Elena held his gaze, though it clearly cost her something. Does it matter? It matters when my wife disappears. The word hung in the air. Caleb's posture shifted, subtle but unmistakable. Wife. Elena didn't look at him. I'm not disappearing, she said. I'm here. Victor's eyes flicked briefly toward Caleb, assessing him in a single glance before returning to her. And you think this is appropriate? I think it's necessary. For what? Elena hesitated. The truth pressed against her, urgent and insistent, but speaking it felt like crossing a line she couldn't return from. For me, she said finally. Victor's expression hardened. You don't make decisions like that alone. I just did. Silence followed, heavy and charged. Caleb remained where he was, neither intervening nor retreating. This wasn't his conflict, but it was no longer something he could ignore. Victor stepped closer to Elena, lowering his voice. You're coming back with me. No. The word was quiet, but it carried weight. Victor's jaw tightened. Don't make this difficult. It already is. For a moment, it seemed as though he might argue further, might push harder. But instead, he exhaled slowly, regaining his composure. This isn't over, he said. You'll remember where you belong. The same words from the night before. He turned without another glance, returning to his car with the same controlled precision. The engine started, and within moments, he was gone, leaving behind a silence that felt heavier than before. Elena stood motionless, her breath unsteady. Caleb approached after a moment, stopping just close enough to be heard. You didn't tell me. She didn't look at him. I didn't think it mattered. It does. I know. Another pause stretched between them, filled with things neither of them said. You should have gone with him, Caleb said quietly. Elena finally turned, her eyes meeting his. There was something different in them now, not just conflict but resolve. No, she said. I shouldn't have. The certainty in her voice unsettled him more than anything else. Because for the first time, Caleb realized this wasn't just a temporary stay. It was the beginning of something neither of them could easily walk away from. The words that changed everything. The ranch did not forget what had happened. Even as the day resumed its quiet rhythm, something unspoken lingered in the air, like the echo of a storm that had passed but not truly ended. The land remained steady, unchanged in its vast indifference, yet within its boundaries, the balance had shifted. Caleb felt it in the way Elena moved. She worked beside him as she had the day before, her hands steady, her attention focused, but the ease that had briefly existed between them was gone. In its place was awareness, sharp, unavoidable, and threaded with restraint. Neither of them mentioned Victor, but his presence remained, not in body, but in implication. You don't have to stay, Caleb said eventually, his voice cutting through the quiet as they stood near the stables. Elena didn't look at him. I know. Then why are you? The question was simple, but the weight behind it was not. She brushed a strand of hair from her face, buying herself a moment. Because leaving would mean going back, and staying means something else. Yes. Caleb studied her, searching for hesitation, for doubt, anything that might make this easier to understand. But what he found instead unsettled him more. Resolve. You're married, he said, not as an accusation, but as a fact that demanded acknowledgement. I'm aware. That should mean something. It does. Then act like it. The words were sharper than he intended, but he didn't take them back. Elena turned to face him fully, her expression steady but not unfeeling. You think I don't understand what this looks like? I think you're standing in the middle of something you can't control. And you're not. The question caught him off guard. Caleb exhaled slowly, running a hand along the rough wood of the stable door. I don't step into situations that complicate things. A faint, almost bitter smile touched her lips. That's easy to say when you have the luxury of distance. And you don't. No, she said quietly. I don't. The honesty in her voice stripped the conversation of its edges, leaving something more raw behind. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The wind shifted, carrying with it the faint scent of rain. Dark clouds had begun to gather along the horizon, slow and inevitable. You should go inside, Caleb said. Storm's coming. Elena glanced toward the sky, then back at him. I've seen storms before. Not like this one. There was meaning in his words that extended beyond the weather. Still, she followed him toward the house. The storm arrived with sudden force. Rain struck the roof in relentless waves, the sound filling the small space with a steady, unyielding rhythm. Lightning split the sky, followed by thunder that seemed to shake the walls themselves. Inside, the air felt closer, charged in a way that had nothing to do with the weather. Elena stood near the window, watching as the world outside blurred into motion. The ranch, so open and expansive before, now felt contained, almost isolated. Caleb remained near the door, his presence steady but distant. You should be used to this, he said after a while. To storms? She asked. To being somewhere you don't belong. She turned slightly, her gaze narrowing. You're still trying to push me away. I'm trying to keep things clear. They're already not. The words settled heavily between them. Another flash of lightning illuminated the room, casting brief, sharp shadows across their faces. For a second, everything felt exposed, every thought, every hesitation. You're making a mistake, Caleb said. Elena took a step closer. Then why haven't you told me to leave? I have. No, she said softly. You've suggested it. There's a difference. He didn't respond. Because she was right. The silence stretched, filled only by the relentless sound of rain. I didn't come here to ruin anything, she continued. I came here because I couldn't breathe where I was. Caleb's jaw tightened slightly. That doesn't justify this. I'm not trying to justify it. Then what are you doing? Elena hesitated. For the first time since she had arrived, uncertainty broke through her composure. But it didn't last long. I'm choosing, she said. Choosing what? She met his gaze fully now, whatever restraint had held her back beginning to fracture. Something real. The words landed harder than they should have. Caleb took a step back, as if distance might restore the control he felt slipping. Real doesn't mean right. No, she agreed. But it means honest. And honesty comes with consequences. I know. Do you? His voice lowered, rougher now. Because once you cross that line, there's no going back. Elena moved closer again, closing the space he had tried to create. Maybe I don't want to go back. The storm outside intensified, thunder rolling across the sky in deep, resonant waves. Caleb could feel the shift, the moment tightening around them, pulling everything toward a point he had been trying to avoid. You don't understand what you're asking, he said. I understand exactly what I'm saying. Then say it clearly. For a heartbeat, the world seemed to pause. Elena's breath steadied, her expression settling into something unshakable. I will have your child. The words hung in the air, quiet but absolute. Caleb didn't move. For a moment, it felt as though the storm itself had gone silent, as though everything had narrowed to that single sentence. It wasn't just what she had said. It was what it meant. Escape. Defiance. A break from everything that had defined her before. And an invitation he had no right to accept. "You don't mean that," he said, though the certainty in her eyes told him otherwise. "I do. You're married, and I'm not living." The answer cut deeper than anything else she had said. Caleb turned away, running a hand through his hair as he tried to steady himself. This wasn't something he could fix with distance or silence. This was a choice, one that demanded an answer. "You're asking me to be part of something that will destroy everything around us," he said. "I'm asking you to be part of something that finally matters." He let out a slow breath, the weight of the moment pressing against him. For years, he had built his life on control, on boundaries that kept things simple, contained. But standing here, with the storm closing in and Elena refusing to step back, he realized something he hadn't allowed himself to consider before. Some lines weren't meant to hold. Some were meant to be crossed. Caleb turned back to her, his gaze steady but no longer distant. "This changes everything," he said. Elena didn't hesitate. "I know." Another flash of lightning filled the room, followed by thunder that seemed to echo through the ground itself. And in that moment, with the storm at its peak and the world beyond the walls fading into chaos, the line between right and wrong no longer felt as solid as it once had. It felt fragile and dangerously close to breaking. What love costs? The storm passed before dawn, leaving the ranch washed in a muted, uncertain calm. The earth smelled of rain, the dust settled into darkened soil, and the sky stretched wide and pale as if nothing had happened. But inside the house, everything had changed. Elena stood near the window, her reflection faint against the glass, her thoughts louder than the silence around her. The words she had spoken the night before still echoed in her mind, not with regret, but with the weight of their permanence. There was no undoing them. Behind her, Caleb moved quietly, his presence steady but altered. The distance he had once maintained had shifted into something more complicated, closer, yet burdened. Neither of them spoke immediately. Some moments demanded silence before they could be understood. "You should leave today," Caleb said finally. The words were calm, but not indifferent. Elena didn't turn. "Is that what you want?" "It's what makes sense." "That's not the same thing." "No," he admitted. "It's not." She faced him then, searching his expression for certainty, for detachment. Anything that might make this easier to accept. But what she found instead was conflict, carefully restrained but impossible to hide. "You said everything changes," she reminded him. "So why are you trying to keep it the same?" "Because change doesn't always make things better. It makes them honest. And honesty comes with a cost. I'm willing to pay it." Caleb held her gaze, measuring the truth in her words. "You don't know the full price. Neither do you." That was true, and it unsettled him more than anything else. Before he could respond, the distant sound of an engine cut through the quiet. This time, there was no hesitation in Elena's reaction. She closed her eyes briefly, as if gathering herself, then exhaled slowly. He won't stop. Caleb didn't need clarification. He already knew. The car approached with the same controlled pace, its presence deliberate, inevitable. When it came to a stop, Victor stepped out, his posture as composed as ever. But there was something sharper in his expression now, something less restrained. "This ends today," Caleb said quietly. Elena looked at him. "Yes, it does." But they both understood that endings were rarely simple. Victor reached them in a matter of seconds, his gaze moving between them with precise calculation. "I see you're still here," he said to Elena, though his attention lingered on Caleb just a moment longer than necessary. "I told you I would be," she replied, "and I told you that wasn't acceptable." Elena's shoulders straightened slightly. "You don't get to decide that anymore." A flicker of irritation broke through Victor's composure. "You're confused." "No," she said evenly. "I'm clear for the first time." His jaw tightened. "This place," he gestured dismissively to the ranch. "This situation, it's temporary. You'll come back, and we'll forget this ever happened." Elena shook her head. I won't. Victor's gaze hardened, shifting fully to Caleb now. And you, he said, his voice cool but edged. You think this is something you can keep? Caleb didn't react to the provocation. I'm not keeping anything. Then you're interfering. No, Caleb said steadily. I'm not stopping her from choosing. Victor let out a short, humorless breath. You really believe she has a choice? I know I do, Elena cut in. Silence followed, heavy and charged. Victor studied her, searching for doubt, for hesitation, anything that might give him leverage. But whatever he was looking for, he didn't find it. You're making a mistake, he said. Maybe, she admitted, but it's mine to make. The simplicity of her answer seemed to unsettle him more than defiance would have. For a moment, it looked as though he might argue further, might push harder, but something in her expression stopped him. The control he had relied on, the certainty of his influence, it wasn't there anymore. You'll regret this, he said finally. Maybe, she repeated, but not for the reasons you think. Victor held her gaze a second longer, then turned away abruptly. Without another word, he returned to his car. The engine started, and just like that, he was gone. The silence he left behind felt different from before. Not heavy, not oppressive, just open. Elena exhaled slowly, her shoulders relaxing for the first time since he had arrived. But the release was not relief alone. It carried uncertainty, consequence, and something deeper that she couldn't yet define. It's done, she said quietly. Caleb didn't answer immediately, because he knew it wasn't that simple. It started, he corrected. She looked at him, a question in her eyes. This doesn't end with him leaving, he continued. It follows you. It follows us. I know. Do you? Elena stepped closer, not with urgency, but with intention. I'm not asking for certainty, she said. I'm choosing what comes with it. Caleb studied her, the weight of everything pressing against the moment. And if what comes with it isn't what you expect, then I'll face it. He searched her expression one last time for hesitation. There was none, only truth. Slowly, he nodded, not an agreement, but an acceptance. The wind moved across the land again, softer now, carrying the scent of rain and something new beneath it. The ranch stretched wide around them, unchanged and yet entirely different. Elena glanced toward the horizon, then back at Caleb. What happens now? He followed her gaze, considering the question not as a problem to solve, but as something to step into. Now, he said, his voice steady, we find out what this really is. It wasn't a promise. It wasn't a guarantee, but it was enough. And as the morning light settled over the land, neither of them moved away. Because whatever came next, they had already crossed the line that made turning back impossible.